Brain plasticity, right? So again, like this is a term I'm sure we've all heard of. It's also called neuroplasticity. It is, for a very long time, the paradigm was that we are born with a particular number of cells and, or neurons, which are brain cells, and that this is a fixed thing. It cannot change. All that can happen is that a degradation through life. However, more recent studies have found that our brains do have this lifelong capacity to change, to reorganize, to rewire in response to experiences and learning. And this is important not just for learning new skills. I think Jeff mentioned, everything that PSS is doing, for example. So these are programs, cybersecurity for people that are 59, 60 and older. So of course, it's not important just for learning, but also for how we relate to the world around us. So, and the fact that we can positively impact our brain through these activities, to me, is a message of great hope, which is why I'm so excited to be here. There are certain times in our lives when neuroplasticity, there's a lot of neuroplasticity that happens, and it's not just one thing, right? So it's not just one kind of change that's happening in the brain, but there's several different processes that occur throughout an individual's lifetime. And many types of brain cells are involved. And of course, these are things that, people are spending careers and lifetimes looking at. So again, super complex, but the good news is that we can understand quite a bit of it. So there is an age-dependent aspect to it. Of course, as we know, neuroplasticity can occur or does occur over the entire lifetime. But there are certain periods of one's life when this is more prevalent as compared to others. And of course, during brain development, one of those times is during brain development, so during the ages of 0 to 5 years of age. And then the second one is an adaptive mechanism. So if somebody has had a loss function or, just making this a traumatic brain injury, those are the kinds of events where there's a lot of plasticity that happens to maximize function despite the area of the brain that has been damaged. So again, speaks to this marvelous capability of our brains to really change in real time, when there is trauma, when there is something like, a traumatic brain injury. And genes and environment really work hand in hand to influence neuroplasticity. We may know all of this. So, over the first few years of life, there's a rapid growth of the brain. There's lots of things happening. There are these, the red things here, they're called axons. These are the ones that send information out to other neurons. There's dendrites, which take information in. Synapse is the points of contact, or the almost points of contact that we can see here, which is where most of the activity or the synaptic plasticity is taking on. And we are born with many more synapses than we end up with. So this is a process called synaptic pruning, where weaker synaptic contacts are eliminated, whereas stronger ones are strengthened. So how is it decided, right? Which ones are eliminated and which ones are strengthened? And most of it comes through experience. So experience strengthens the connections, and those are the ones that are retained, whereas the connections that are not used very frequently are preserved. And this, process called programmed cell death or apoptosis is the one that really is responsible for decreasing, or that pruning of synapses and neurons. How do we study all this, right? So there's so much happening at all levels of the brain. And as you can imagine, there's many ways to study this process. Synaptic plasticity, neuroplasticity can be at the level of the synapse. It can be at the level of the network, right? So these are really two very different levels, and we can understand or study them through many ways. For my Ph.D. work, I was looking at epilepsy or seizure disorders, and I did a technique called electrophysiology, which is literally recording electrical activity from neurons and from neuronal circuits. There's also imaging. There's also newer techniques called, for example, transcranial magnetic stimulation. And as we mentioned, keeping in mind the limitations of these techniques as well. All this is good, right? Okay, there is a whole bunch of things happening, but what does it mean for us in the real world? Does it even work in the real world, right? Of course it does. We all, we're all here because we have some experience into how plasticity works for us. Brain imaging, MRI, fMRI really helps us observe brain plasticity. And many of us here, we might be skilled, for example, in a particular thing. We might be musicians, we might have been learning music for many, many years, and we can see changes in very particular parts of the brain in people who have become experts at learning a certain skill. There's this really interesting study that was done in taxi cab drivers in London. And apparently in London, if you want to become a taxi cab driver, you have to do this whole test. You have to study for years and years. And over the years of study, people found that a very specific part of the brain called the hippocampus was actually increased in size. So again, real time over, doing one thing over and over again, challenging ourselves, it really helps us. It's evidence for it in the real world. People who can speak more than one language, musicians as compared to non-musicians. So all of these, again, evidence for plasticity in the real world.
Oh, here's a question that might be somewhat related. From the audience, can the aging brain benefit from neuroplasticity from, say, for example, learning a new activity?
Yes, yes. And we will, I think in the next few minutes, we'll go through what those activities are. But that is, I love that we're like already thinking about, connecting that already. So thank you so much for this really, really cool question. And I love that we have questions already, so that makes me feel very, very happy. So I think we again know this. We are, at birth we have way more neurons and synapses than later in life. So the image on the, what is this, right or left? It's my left, shows exactly, during our lifespan from birth to adolescence and then to adulthood, what happens to neurons and synapses. So the number of neurons decreases, number of synapses also decreases. We talked about synaptic pruning, which is this very specific way in which synapses that are not used are eliminated. And again, I don't want to spend too much time thinking of or talking about this. I mean, I'm happy to provide the sources for this. It's very, very interesting stuff. Again, shows just all that goes into brain development and aging. So there is apoptosis, which is the programmed cell death, hormones. All of these things have an impact on neurons and synapses. There are neurotrophic factors. There's a whole interplay of apoptosis, of neurotrophic factors, and of neurotransmitters, and that really help us be who we are. So again, this excitement about understanding or even trying to understand who we are by thinking about hormones, by thinking about plasticity, is really super exciting. And I think to the question that was asked, let me go back. So what are some of the interventions, right? And I think, again, much of this is, probably not news to us, right? Environmental enrichment, so doing different things, doing new things, challenging ourselves. Physical exercise there's many papers that talk about the act of physical exercise and plasticity. Creative endeavors, and I think this is what Jeff was talking about, the PSS programs. And something's very interesting. I hope you find it interesting as well, which is some things I found on wisdom. So plasticity and wisdom. So enrichment, this graph on the left just shows, again, there's environmental enrichment, which could mean, being intellectually stimulated, and it has an effect on, again, neurotrophic factors. We talked about those in the past, has effects on the actual neurons and synapses through many things, as well as neurotransmitters. So enrichment and aging work, we can think that enrichment causes an increase in plasticity, whereas aging potentially causes a decrease in plasticity. But the more we have environmental enrichment, around us, can help in promoting plasticity and in conserving the neurons that we have. Again, there's many neurotransmitters in the brain, and there's an interplay, right? So there's an interplay between the positive effects of environmental enrichment and the negative effects of aging, that could lead to successful aging. I think productive aging, which is positive aging, which is what Jeff was talking about. The one thing I found that was really interesting, and I see this when I work with my older dancers, which is challenge, right? So making things challenging. And what is so interesting is that one of the requirements of plasticity to emerge, or for us to make use of the plasticity that is inherent in our brains, is that the tasks we do have to be sufficiently difficult. So sufficiently difficult for us. So there's many ways to do it. For example, when I do dance programming, it could be increasing speed. So if I do something in a slow speed, doing it and then increasing the speed, so it really is a challenge to keep up. And there's this apparent paradox that we might feel that when there's more of a challenge, there is a reduced performance during the training phase. But what people have shown is that when we look long term, there is an increase in memory, in retention and formation of memory. So although something might seem challenging to us at a particular time, there are beneficial effects of it later on. And again, this is something we can use again in our daily lives, just knowing this, right? And this also means that, as a society, we need to provide the correct context in which our older adults, in which our seniors remain challenged, however, in a way that is safe, right? In a way that's challenging but safe, and encouraged to adapt to new contexts and new things. Exercise, again, so many things that talk about exercise and the brain. Won't go through all of them. Happy to provide papers though. And there's a very strong association between physical activity and cognition. Exercise, as we know, improves cardiovascular health. There's an improvement in cognitive, sensory, so many outcomes. What is exactly happening as a result of exercise that positively impacts the brain is not completely known, but we do know, for example, this graphic here on the right, that does show potentially a few mechanisms by which exercise might be beneficial. And creative aging, one of my favorite things. Music, dance, visual arts, performing arts. I think many of us might be, we all love music. We all can, there's, I'm sure, one song that reminds us of our childhood that decreases stress for us. Deep focus. So, really immersed in an artistic task helps people enter a flow state where we are really we lose sense of time, and we're really creating something that's aesthetically beautiful. It helps us being more present, and again has a positive effect on plasticity. It can help process emotions and imagine a hopeful future through art. And plasticity and wisdom. This I thought was super interesting. It's how do you define wisdom, right? It might seem like it's a bit fuzzy for us to kind of think about, but there are many components of wisdom such as empathy, compassion, emotional regulation, self-reflection, and wisdom. So, however you define wisdom, hopefully it is through some of these characteristics, is associated with superior well-being, quality of life, and some people argue that is a better measure of quality of life as compared to perhaps even physical health, or our socioeconomic status. And I think this is so interesting for older adults. This I can vouch for myself. Most of my older adult dancers are definitely more self-reflective. They have insight, they're tolerant of other people's perspectives, perhaps aware of their own limitations. They, even how we remember things. Elders often pay attention to pleasurable things, gratifying events, rather than sad or frightening ones. And you might have heard of the grandmother hypothesis. So, of course, we don't know if this is true or not, but this wisdom of aging might have an evolutionary benefit because it might help grandmothers be around by transmitting cultural knowledge. And again, not sure if this is true or not, but could be. So
Well,
that
here's a
ends.
related question. Experience and learning equals wisdom? Question mark.
Ooh, that is amazing. I'm going to write it down. Experience. That is such a nice, like, pithy way. Experience and learning is wisdom. Yeah. Thank you for that. That is so cool. Oopsie. That is all I had. I'm gonna put this in the chat as well. So if you do want to keep in touch, please do so. But thank you. That was a little bit of what I had. I hope that was exciting. As you can tell, I'm like always excited to talk about the brain. And thanks for the amazing questions also.
Yes, thank you so much. If anyone has questions, let me see. Okay, Sloka put something in the chat, so you can be in touch with her, follow her on social. And if anyone has any questions, here's a comment. This was fantastic. What exactly is creative dancing? That's one of the
Ooh,
questions we have.
thank you. Um, I think I mentioned creative aging. So it's like an umbrella term where I think Jeff, you might be better equipped to talk about creative aging rather than me.
Yeah, creative aging is finding ways to view aging positively. Your attitude towards aging can actually influence how long you live. It actually has, it's been studied that that your attitude towards aging actually affects your longevity. And so the things that we do when we age, including, you could learn to dance. If you have arthritis and you used to do needlepoint, you could find something else to do that's related, like learning how to pivot. Like, oh, well, even though I can't do intricate things, maybe I can paint, or people take up writing, drawing, dancing, learning history, taking courses, taking languages, things that you're interested in, developing hobbies. These are all positive aging examples. So yeah, I had some questions, and maybe it'll jog the audience as well. Um, does neuroplasticity affect mindset? And if so, how?
Ooh. uh, Again, I think it's important for me to have a disclaimer that I'm a neuroscientist and not a psychologist. So again, much of my, if there is a psychologist in the room, please, like, you should be the one talking about it. But the little bit I know, there is, you might have heard like growth mindset, and I think, I mean, the way I heard it was when I was teaching students. So the growth mindset is like one way of thinking about how we always have the capacity to change and to grow, which means that we can nurture our intellect through lifelong learning. And I guess this is one of the things that PSS is doing, is really helping that process of lifelong learning, no matter our age. So believing that we can learn new information in an active way, taking, again, none of this is a lot of this is intuitive, right? uh, Taking incremental steps to improve ourselves. When we think of what we do for creative aging, being consistent also with it, trying to do new things, learn new things without necessarily thinking of the outcome. And this is why I think, uh, when we think, at least, by using Bharatanatyam for creative aging, we are not necessarily thinking of what the end product looks like, right? It is really, we're thinking of learning, of feeling, of expressing. So thinking of mindset, that growth mindset, does plasticity can help us with the growth mindset. I guess that's short answer.
Mhm. And someone called me Dr. Nestler, but I'm not a doctor. But does self-reflection add to the concept of creative
You know,
learning?
that is, I'm
Hmm.
gonna make a note. That is so interesting. I don't know. I would assume so. I do see in my dancers, there is definitely that. I think we talked about, the wisdom, right? Like being able to like really think about ourselves. I think there's definitely that aspect of aging that does help learning, learning no matter our age. Sorry, I'm jumbling my words, but
Does anything hurt neuroplasticity?
very interesting. So I think I mentioned how, for my PhD, I was looking at epilepsy. And there are times when, so everything I've talked about for the, past several minutes, we were thinking of adaptive plasticity, right? So how plasticity is good, of course, it is, in many contexts, helps us learn new things, help us respond to challenges and to situations. Yeah, but exactly. So, mental illness, I studied epilepsy for a very long time, and, one could say that there's maladaptive plasticity. PTSD is another example where, the night terrors, the nightmares, flashbacks are plastic events that are happening in the brain, but because of, again, the way the brain may be wired, experiences events that might have happened, the same or similar mechanisms of plasticity are not helping us anymore. So definitely complex. I think I could just say that things are complex.
And you also mentioned sleep deprivation.
Yeah,
Ah,
exactly.
yeah.
So, and it's so interesting. Part of my work, I do work with homelessness and housing here in New York City. And, we were thinking of, just asking people how much sleep you get. And most of them, I mean, which is
Hmm.
not surprising, right? Like if you're living in a shelter, like there's, people are coming in and out, there's really no autonomy. But most of our folks said that they don't get more than 3 hours of sleep a night. And it was really, not surprising, but also just such a shock, that something which should be a human right, like it's really not available to so many of us. And stress, yes, stress can definitely, through cortisol, can definitely influence neuroplasticity. And again, I mean, with our people with precarious housing, we see, past trauma and stress and sleep deprivation, perhaps, not being able to eat well, not having that much autonomy over life, all these things.
Yeah, that's
And
interesting. You mentioned cortisol because earlier you were referring to neuroendocrine. So that must mean that the brain or other organs produce hormones that affect um, neuroplasticity.
exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
for example, like one example is pregnancy, right? So pregnancy affects the brain. There's many things in pregnancy, but one of the things is, that happens is hormones. So stress, pregnancy. One of the things that I'm super interested in, one of the many things is caregiving, right? So there's, I think Jeff, you're a caregiver, and how caregiving changes the brain, how, the fact that we are taking care of somebody, even a pet, plant, parents, child, uh, those things also, change our brains in very tangible ways.
Interesting. Yeah. Does neuroplasticity increase intelligence?
That is interesting. I think I would say short answer yes. However, it's not that easy. I think by this time people know that there's no clear clear answer when you ask me. But uh, short answer is yes. However, how intelligence is measured, right? Like that is always something that we should keep in mind. We don't probably measure intelligence regularly, but studies have shown that those with high IQs are also the ones that have shown huge changes across their lifespan. Um, and there's like studies that have been done in twins, and they found that there was a genetic component to intelligence as well. And of course, short answer yes, but things are complicated.
Hmm. Here's a question. goes over my head, but neurotransmitters and hormones are both chemicals. Do they interact?
Uh, they do. I don't know, that's something I have to look up. I don't know if they interact and like as chemicals and chemicals, or if there's a neuron and there's both of them affect the neuron. It was just, I think the latter is more likely. So I'm not, I don't think that it is, there's a neurotransmitter and hormones are interacting and then they affect the neurons. They both,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
hormonal system and the neurotransmitters have impacts on not just, I shouldn't say just neurons. Yeah, I think hormones and memory, that's like such a good point. Um, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And does neuroplasticity affect personality?
I love all your questions. uh, yes, potentially. I think as we define neuroplasticity today in like extremely broad terms, right? So we look in everything that changes us, right? And which is like everything in the whole world. But short answer is yes. But of course, it's how to actually measure it is probably not that easy. There's gonna be variability. If you wanna combine people, usually when you see scientific journal articles, it's usually a combination of like many people, right? So how would you what is like the method or the statistical method by which you would do it. Um, but in short, yes. So the capacity to think of our brains as plastic, as malleable, as adaptable, does indeed affect change personality.
Interesting. And what about nutrition? Does what nutrition can help with neuroplasticity
I'm not a
as a good thing?
nutritionist. Yeah. Again, not being a nutritionist, few of the things I found are things that are good for everything, right? There's like things that reduce inflammation. There's things that are generally good for us, to my knowledge. And there's like eating blueberries, right? Like all of those things that we know already. So I think there's this one compound, resveratrol, or something like that. That is the one that people are actually looking at for brain activity. But other than that,
Hmm.
it's fruit and vegetables, everything that we should probably already do. Like nothing, no supplements, I would say, at least that I know of.
Yeah, I'm just typing something into the chat. I copy pasted the uh, an incorrect thing. So uh,
Mm.
you
Oh,
had
amazing.
provided me with that link. Um, oh, yeah, interesting question. Does neuroplasticity occur on a daily basis?
Short answer, yes. Long answer, it's probably not measurable on a daily basis,
Hmm.
So, for example, if, plasticity can be on the synaptic level, it can be at the level of the really like the thin, in the diagram that I showed, the really thin, like thread-like things that are the dendrites. So while plasticity probably does happen on a daily basis as we are challenging ourselves, learning new things, getting exposed to new experiences, measuring it is probably not the easiest to do. So potentially the effects of this constant practice and learning is something that's going to be evident, not right away, not acutely. But again, that is a reason to keep doing it, right? I think that's a paradox of
Yes,
things.
yes. And you had mentioned exercise. What kind of exercise is good for to increase neuroplasticity?
The few things I've seen are things that improve cardiovascular health, but more recent stuff I've seen is on like weight training. So those are the two things that I know there is evidence for, like things that improve our cardiovascular health and like muscle, like weight training. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't know which one is better, and maybe it's like one thing is better for one person.
Yeah, and also I think there's more to simply aerobic activity than meets the eye because you learn how to perform aerobic activity in a safe manner.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the same thing with weight training, where your form is very important. Paying attention to form, knowing what proper form is, um, knowing proper cadence or, intensity, things like of that nature.
That is so
Um,
true. That is, and I think this is why dance is
yeah,
such a good thing, right? Like you learn all those things, but in a way that is a lot of fun, and you're expressing yourself, right? So, but I think that's such a good point. Like how to, and it doesn't matter the age, right? Like how to not hurt yourself is an important
right.
skill. I think that should be very important, no matter how old. But exactly, and I think this is the power of dance for creative aging because we are active, we are creating something beautiful. So there's that aesthetic, aesthetically things are beautiful, and it's again I'm biased because that's like what I do, but it is so holistic in terms of all the parts of the brain that are engaged. We are visualizing things, we are telling stories through gestures and through our faces, and we are physically active. So yeah, again,
Yeah,
my bias.
and also I think a part of that, a part of all exercise is balance. I know that balance is very important as we age because it's not really good to fall.
Hmm, hmm.
And I wonder if balance or learning to balance is a
Oh, I'm
neuroplasticity
sure. I'm sure.
enhancer.
Yeah, oh,
Mhm.
absolutely. I mean, yeah, learning to balance, doing it in a way, again, that's safe, right? Like that we can, and there's how we can do our day-to-day things, right? Like, especially as we age, in a way that's safe. I know like my mother-in-law, many some years ago, even like getting out of bed, right? Like when she was really sick. So even how to do those kinds of things in a way that's safe and doesn't hurt us. I mean, those things are really interesting. I think the thing that really one of the things that really excites me about plus, I mean, there is this what happens to our body, right? Like there is that physiology of how our physical activity can change our minds. I mean, how amazing is that?
Yeah. And also, people that are injured or have to relearn how to use, use an arm or something. That's all neuroplasticity. Like
It is,
you're
yeah,
healing
yeah.
or you're in physical therapy, things
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
that.
Rehab, physical therapy. There's this really like interesting, well, this girl who had really like bad seizures, and I'm gonna find this one article, but they had to like resect part of her brain, like they had to literally go in and remove chunks of her brain, and many years or some years later, like she's fully, she's functional. I don't know if she's fully functional, but she has found a way that she can function even with like much of her brain removed. Like how amazing that we have this capability. So absolutely, like recovering from accidents, from trauma, for rehab, like all those things. And again, like making things challenging, not so challenging that we wouldn't do it, but challenging that we find them challenging in a fun way, and that we are consistent with it. I think again, this is why creative aging is so cool, because we are doing these things in a safe way that is enjoyable and aesthetically pleasing.
Um, Here's a question from the audience. How about meditation?
Ooh, that is an amazing question. I don't know I should find out. I don't know the exact ways by which meditation affects plasticity, but I mean, absolutely. Again, meditation over time, right? So, um, like I think the seasoned meditators, so people who do it, who have practice of doing it over, I don't know, months maybe, or maybe years, but
Mhm.
definitely changes in their brain structure, like have been found. So amazing. That's a great question. Ooh, stress. Yes, we talked about stress. Um, that's such a nice question. 4 or 5 daily activities generally available to seniors that have the most positive impact. Um, I can look up. I mean, off the top of my head, I have, of my dancer friends, I have people that do crossword puzzles. They take the New York Times, and they do that like every single day. That's definitely one of those things, if that is something that you find enjoyable. Music is another one. So, responding to music, listening to music. Of course, I am biased because this is, in a way, all that I know. Some kind of creative exercise, some kind of artistic exercise. What else? I don't know. Four or
Cooking.
five. Yeah, I think
um,
exposing ourselves to new challenging things. However, and I think it could be whatever that means to you, right? Like if you like to cook, that is great, right? If you don't like to cook, then probably not that.
mhm. Um, some people are encouraged to go for a daily walk
Yeah.
if they don't, you know.
Mm-hmm. And being outside, right? Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I think all these things are so intuitive, right? Well, of course, I mean, of course, these things are good, but maybe in our busy day-to-day lives, we probably don't get the chance. But again, making a habit, a consistent habit of going outside, yes, cooking and gardening. Oh my God, you see my plants here, but um, absolutely, like the physical activity of, making something grow. I mean, it's
Yeah,
so
I would think
tangible.
one of the main emphases is learning something new. Always learning something new.
Exactly.
Be it from taking a course, learning a new language, learning an instrument. Uh, what else? Oh,
Learning
I
how to
had
draw. I
mentioned
think, yeah, you were
mhm,
saying you wanted to draw, right?
mhm, learning to draw. I had mentioned that I tried to my dominant hand learn to write with the other hand, learn to handwrite.
Even
I wonder
handwriting,
if
right?
that
How
helps.
how
Yeah,
often do we get to like write with our hands
I
these days,
know. In this
right?
age of PCs,
It's like it's so
yep.
rare.
Uh, can neuroplasticity heal trauma? It could be stress. It could be, childhood trauma,
Yeah, I mean,
any kind of trauma.
yeah, I'm sure we have heard of CBT, right? Cognitive. Again, I'm not somebody who's not a practitioner of CBT. There are studies that have shown positive effects of cognitive behavioral therapy. I'll
Mhm.
put the paper in the chat, but definitely positive effects on. I think the one I remember was anxiety. So I'm gonna put it here. And this one talks about cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety or social
Mhm.
anxiety disorder.
Okay. Uh, does neuro oh, did someone you wrote that, okay. Does neuroplasticity help with pain management?
Um, the one thing it's interesting. I mean, from what I could tell, I don't think
Mhm.
it's that the people know for sure, or it's like still people, it seems to be still something that people are thinking about. So the question is maybe, the answer is probably maybe. There's an interesting paper here that I'm gonna do. Yeah, physical. Yeah, that's a good point. If we do physical therapy, please, no worries. But this paper talks about, chronic pain. So how neuroplasticity can help alleviate chronic pain. Interestingly, they look at fasting and glucose administration. I'm not sure. Like from what I can tell, they're doing is uh, looking at metabolic aspects of our brain and thinking of our bodies and thinking if that could help chronic pain. I'm not sure. I guess that's my short answer. But in palliative care, I think I mentioned, my little bit of work with palliative care. There is this concept of total pain, which is more than the physical pain. And I know, like, the question is probably about physical pain, but this concept that, there is emotional pain, there is spiritual pain, and as palliative care people interested in palliative care, it makes sense to look at all those facets, spiritual pain in addition to, or psychological pain too, even though they may not be pain in the way we think. Ooh, interesting. I don't know if luminosity is, I have not heard of AARP staying sharp. Um, I don't know, but if there have been studies that show over time if the luminosity, is it an app, if that helps?
Interesting, interesting. Well, you did answer about learning a language or learning to write with a non-dominant hand. Um, are there limits? What are the limits of neuroplasticity?
It's maybe not so much a limit, but uh, this understanding, we talked about genetic factors and environmental factors, right? So, for example, in the group of individuals we were working with actually yesterday that have precarious housing, addiction is substance abuse is one of the things that we see with that population. Well, why is that, right? Like, not everybody that may have two similar situations uh, responds in similar ways. So why is it that some people are addicted, others get addicted, others maybe not, right? So there is always this impact of genetics, right? This tangible genes that are given to us, and not just that, but how they interact with environment. So probably not a limitation of plasticity, but also, for example, somebody who uses a substance, right? You cannot just, I couldn't just tell them go take a walk and everything is going to be okay, right? So I think maybe in that sense that is a limitation. Like, I couldn't tell them go exercise, and yeah, there's personality, um, and I couldn't say just do something for your plasticity and you won't be craving anymore, right? So I think there are genetic factors that we, again, don't fully understand, and we don't understand potentially fully the interaction of genes and environment. That was a really long, long,
Yes.
long
Well,
answer.
this hour went really quickly. Wait, I see one last question. Let's see if we can eke one. Oh, we got that. We answered that one. Very good. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This is really an exciting topic, and it really went by so fast. So thanks so much. It was really enjoyable.
Thank you to all of
And
you for like all the amazing. This is so exciting.
yes. And I just put, the part that I recorded when I remembered will be on our YouTube channel. And I posted how to find our YouTube channel on YouTube in the chat. So with that, I wish everyone a wonderful night. And thank you once again, Sloka.
Thank you.